When the husband brought his mistress home and kicked his wife out the door, she silently handed him the doctor's report and said, "I hope she'll take care of you when you're helpless soon." "What?" Garrick mumbled in confusion, staring at the test results. However, his confusion quickly turned into horror. "Vionette, how could this happen? What now? Tell me, what should I do?" "What can I say?" Vionette replied. "This is no longer my concern. You are no longer part of my life. Go talk to your young wife, the mother of your child. As for me, we're divorced. Let me remind you." Garrick collapsed onto a chair, clutching his hair as if Vionette's words were a mere trifle. Married or divorced, 10 years together still mattered for Vionette. It wasn't easy for her to let go of her gravely ill husband to another woman. Could Rachel care for him as she would have? Would she fight for his life like Vionette would? Vionette had learned about her husband's diagnosis while he was away on a week-long business trip. She exhausted herself talking to doctors and went to collect the results alone. Upon receiving them, she sat crushed in the oncology clinic's hallway. Initially paralyzed by fear, she quickly began devising a treatment plan and thinking of how to break the news to Garrick. It wasn't going to be easy, but she wanted him to hear it from her. A loyal wife and friend who could provide support and hope. Over the phone, however, especially when he was far from home, such news couldn't be delivered. When Garrick called that evening and asked what the doctor had said, she replied calmly, "Don't worry. Everything's fine. There's some treatment required, but nothing serious. Don't stress. Just come home soon, Garrick. I miss you." If only she had known how her dear husband, with whom she had shared so much in their 10 years of marriage, would return. They had married young, with nothing but ambition and grand dreams. Garrick's plans often overshadowed hers. She was content even with their tiny room in an old apartment building, their first home together. But Garrick wasn't satisfied. He vowed to build a life where his wife and future children would never want for anything. "Trust me, Vionette. Soon you'll have everything. You'll never regret marrying me," he'd say daily. But when Vionette became pregnant shortly after their wedding, his reaction wasn't what she'd hoped for. "Vionette, what are you thinking? Children? Now? Where would you put a crib or stroller? Bathing a baby in a rusty tub? It really isn't the right time. It's not fair to bring a child into this mess." Garrick's logic was sound, but Vionette cried bitterly. After all, it was going to be their firstborn. The decision to terminate, as it turned out, also meant they couldn't have other children later. Despite the difficulties, improvements began. They were young, loved each other, and for a long time simply didn't think about having children. In order for Garrick to start his business, they had to take out a large loan. The repayment of each installment initially threw them off balance, sometimes forcing them to live on just bread and water. But this didn't last long. Very soon, Garrick and his partner Jareth's business started to thrive. They paid off the loan, took out a mortgage for an apartment, but this time there were no such hardships or worries. Even the fact that new expenses appeared didn't bother them much. They knew they could handle it all. Vionette, however, was worried about something else. After 5 years, Vionette realized she couldn't conceive. Thus began visits to doctors, clinics, and treatments, all in vain. "Vionette, I'm afraid these so-called treatments will ruin your health. You're not sick. Stop running to these doctors," Garrick said. "But I want our child. Everyone says there's still a chance, and as long as there is, I can't give up. If nothing happens in 5 years, we'll consider adoption," she replied. "Good, but for now, take a break." "I'm tired of all this," Garrick said. Vionette noticed Garrick had grown distant. The passionate love they once shared had faded, but they weren't discussing divorce, even with her infertility. Yes, her husband was often inattentive, sometimes irritable, rude, frequently stayed late at work, and went on business trips. Well, what could she do? He was a businessman. Vionette had thought about going to work herself, but her early marriage had left her without a proper education. She had only finished trade school. It felt awkward, being a businessman's wife but just an ordinary cook. Besides, she had grown accustomed to being a homemaker and enjoyed it. The money she might earn wouldn't make the slightest difference to their family budget. However, the time needed for managing the household would be significantly reduced if she worked. On top of that, her visits to doctors often took up entire days. Meanwhile, Jareth's wife, Natalie, led a carefree life. Younger than Vionette, she didn't think about work or children. Unlike Vionette, Natalie didn't confine herself to the house. She spent her days at social events, trips, or shopping. Vionette couldn't help but compare her own life to Natalie's. Vionette found such a lifestyle utterly wild. She didn't interact with Natalie, though she didn't judge her. Everyone had their own life. Things might have continued as they were, but over the last year, Garrick had started to have health issues. At first, it was nothing major, a slight discomfort in his stomach, the kind of thing men often dismiss. He blamed it on poor eating habits at work, grab-and-go meals and dry snacks. It was just gastritis, he thought. He didn't pay much attention, popping a pill when it hurt and moving on. Vionette, however, was worried. Gastritis might be minor, but it can turn into an ulcer before you know it, she warned. Garrick, please go see a doctor. I'll make an appointment for you this week. When can you go? Not this week, not next week. I don't have time for doctors, Garrick would respond dismissively. You're the one who likes running to doctors, and what good has it done you? They just take your money, that's all. Seeing him every day, Vionette didn't notice the gradual changes in his appearance, but a neighbour stopped her one day. Vionette, what's wrong with Garrick? He looks so thin and yellow. You should get him to a doctor before it's too late. Men never go until it's bad, and then we're stuck taking care of them. Vionette took a closer look and was shocked. Garrick had indeed lost weight, looked unwell, and wasn't eating the same as before. But doctors? Even the herbal teas Vionette brewed for him were a struggle to get him to drink. Later she would blame herself for not being more persistent. She'd never been firm enough with her husband. It wasn't until Garrick could no longer hide it, when he clutched his stomach in pain and groaned, that Vionette couldn't stand it any longer. Garrick, this can't go on. I'm calling a doctor, and we're starting treatment right away. I can't watch you destroy yourself like this. Garrick's reaction frightened her more than his groans. Fine, call the doctor. What else can we do? I'm not refusing, he said in a helpless, lost voice, as if he finally understood how serious it was. Vionette called a general practitioner from the clinic to start with basic tests, but she knew they'd need to see a specialist. After further examinations, the dreaded word oncologist came up. While no diagnosis was confirmed, the mere suggestion was terrifying. So, is it cancer? Garrick asked directly. I'm not saying that, the doctor replied, not looking up from his notes. You need to undergo tests to rule it out. Or confirm it, Garrick said grimly. If it is, we'll start proper treatment right away. There's no need to fear. Even cancer isn't a death sentence anymore. Many cases are treatable, the doctor said firmly. Garrick muttered something about being reassured, though his tone suggested otherwise. All the way home, Vionette tried to comfort him. It's nothing serious yet. They're just being cautious. Remember, I had similar tests done before and everything turned out fine. You'll be okay too. You just need to take better care of yourself. It's easy for you to say, Garrick snapped. You'll live, but what if I don't? It was clear he was scared, lost, and expecting the worst. Vionette was just as afraid, but her fear pushed her into action rather than paralyzing her. Don't talk nonsense. First, we don't even know if anything's wrong. Second, even if it's serious, it's not the end. You're young, you've always been healthy. Stop acting like you're dying already, she said firmly. By the time they got home, Garrick had calmed down. Fine, I'll do the biopsy. And when it shows there's nothing wrong, I'll sue them for scaring me to death, he joked. But he calmed down so much that he decided not to wait for the biopsy results and prepared to leave on a business trip. Are you insane? Vionette cried. What business trip? You're sick. It's just a regular trip. What's the big deal? I feel fine and I have to go. Who else will? You? Jareth? He's busy too. And stop meddling in things you don't understand. It felt to Vionette like Garrick was desperate to escape. His wife, the doctors, everything. Maybe being at work, surrounded by colleagues, helped him feel normal, healthy. At home, the illness loomed large. And really nothing is confirmed yet, she thought, trying to reassure herself. Maybe it's not cancer at all. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that Garrick was running away, not just from her, but from the truth. The heaviness in Vionette's heart only grew, and as it turned out, it wasn't for nothing. A few days after Garrick left on his trip, the doctor called. The diagnosis was confirmed, stage 4, cancer with metastases. Immediate treatment was necessary, but even its success was uncertain. That same day, Garrick called to ask if the results had come in. Of course, she couldn't tell him the truth. "Come back soon, Garrick, I miss you," she said instead, holding back tears. She allowed herself a moment to cry, but quickly wiped her tears away. There was no point in crying now. A treatment plan had to be devised, and their lives were about to change completely. Vionette also had to figure out how to break the devastating news to Garrick gently and manage the emotional storm that was sure to follow. She just wished he would return sooner so they could face it together and start the treatment. She was determined they would defeat this terrible illness and be together for a long, long time. Finally, the key turned in the lock. Garrick had come home, but he wasn't alone. Garrick had long had a second family, though he himself wasn't sure how it had happened. During a work party, he met Rachel, a young, beautiful waitress. Fueled by alcohol and a sense of freedom, he felt like he'd fallen head over heels in love. She seemed interested too, and one thing led to another. They woke up together at her place. At first, he felt ashamed. It was his first time cheating on Vionette, his beloved wife. But then, he rationalized it. What's the big deal? I've been faithful for nearly 5 years. One mistake doesn't mean anything. Vionette won't find out, so it's fine. This won't happen again. But Rachel was captivating, and what Garrick thought would be a one-time mistake turned into a series of secret meetings. Their relationship was mutually enjoyable and seemingly without obligations. Rachel made it clear from the start, "Don't get me wrong, I don't want to marry you. I don't even want anything serious. I just like you, and that's all. If we get tired of each other, we'll just part ways. Simple as that." This arrangement suited Garrick perfectly. His work required frequent trips to nearby towns, so his family life wasn't significantly disrupted. Rachel lived on the other side of the city. They shared no mutual acquaintances, and Garrick's slightly longer business trips didn't raise any alarms with Vionette. These trips gave him time to spend a day or two with Rachel. 3 months into their relationship, Rachel announced she was pregnant. It was unplanned, and she was visibly shaken. "What am I supposed to do? I'm not going to ruin my body with an abortion," she said firmly. Garrick understood her stance. He was all too aware of the consequences an abortion could have. Vionette's infertility was a result of the one he had insisted on years ago. "You're right, Rachel. That's not the solution. But understand, I can't divorce my wife. If you have the baby, I'll support you both, but I can't leave Vionette." "Fine by me," Rachel said curtly. "Live however you want, I don't care. Just pay child support." Their first argument left Garrick wondering if their relationship would end. Part of him was sad. He'd grown attached to her, but part of him thought it might be for the best. He reasoned that he'd still provide for his child, and no one, especially Vionette, would ever have to know. Having a child, even one outside his marriage, felt like a small consolation. But their argument didn't lead to a breakup. Garrick frequently visited Rachel during her pregnancy, bringing fruit and money, though he never stayed long. When their son Johnny was born, Garrick felt a deep, unexpected joy. He even considered telling Vionette the truth, but when her health worsened and it became clear she couldn't have children, he realized it would be too cruel to confess. Garrick's guilt over that first abortion made him more devoted to Vionette, even as his bond with Rachel deepened. He lived a double life, dividing his time and resources between his wife and his mistress. Eventually, Rachel grew tired of their arrangement. Perhaps she realized no one else was eager to marry her. Or perhaps she felt ready to have a complete family. She started dropping hints. The child is growing. How are we going to explain why his father is so rarely home? We'll explain. All dads work. That's normal. You knew this from the beginning, Garrick replied defensively. Yes, but people change. I've changed. And you? You're still singing the same tune. I can't. I can't. What exactly can't you do? Do you even know? Garrick didn't have an answer. He was stuck, caught between two lives he couldn't reconcile, and the consequences of his choices were starting to close in. Garrick truly didn't know what he wanted. Life with Rachel was good, but life with Vionette wasn't bad either. Rachel's recent demands coincided with his health problems, and Garrick even believed that his illness wasn't caused by poor diet, but by nerves. At Rachel's place, he felt like a normal man. She didn't fuss over him like Vionette did. How are you feeling? Did you take your pills? Did you drink the herbal tea? Did you check your blood pressure? Lie down early, you look tired. What would you like for breakfast? Oatmeal or semolina? Those conversations made him feel like he was some kind of disabled person. Yet, after a few hours with Rachel, he'd long for Vionette's care, especially when his stomach began to ache or when he felt nauseous at the sight of Rachel's diet of pizza, sushi, grilled chicken, and creamy desserts. He even worried for their son, Johnny, imagining the harm Rachel's food choices could cause him. Sometimes Garrick dreamed of taking Johnny and going back to Vionette, leaving Rachel behind forever, but he knew such a plan was impossible. One day, Garrick went to Rachel's seeking a break, not so much from work, but from the endless doctor visits and worries that came with them. He was feeling relatively well, and his anxieties seemed to have disappeared along with the familiar pains. All those doctors' predictions are nonsense, he thought. I'm fine, look at me. I have a woman, a growing son. Life is good. He called Vionette, who confirmed that she'd heard the biopsy results and assured him everything was fine. His mood soared. Feeling a surge of affection, he wanted to embrace Rachel and Johnny, overwhelmed by love for them in that moment. But Rachel's reaction was far from warm. Was that your wife? Couldn't find you? Well, go on. Don't keep her waiting. Go hug and kiss her instead, she snapped. Hear that, Johnny? Your daddy's off to see another woman. Guess we've bored him. Stop dragging the child into this, Garrick said wearily. Why shouldn't I? Your son's going to school soon. What will he say when someone asks about his father? And you? Do you even know what you told me last time? Let me remind you. You said things with her were almost over. That was years ago, Garrick. Years. My son's grown and you're still talking about almost. Garrick paced the room thinking, what am I doing? Life is short. I've been close to the end recently. Who am I kidding? I feel sorry for Vionette, but who says I can't feel sorry for her from afar? She still has time to meet someone and be happy. I can live with Rachel and my son, and maybe we'll even have more kids. Unexpectedly, he blurted out, That's enough. Pack your things. We're leaving. Rachel stared at him, shocked. Where? Home, Garrick replied firmly. Let's stop dragging this out. He grabbed a suitcase from the closet. And what about her? Rachel asked. That's not your concern. She'll understand. Johnny, pack your toys. We're going home. You'll have your own room there, he said to his son. Really? Awesome, Johnny shouted, excitedly gathering his belongings. Don't take too much. We'll come back for the rest later, Rachel said pragmatically. The lease isn't up until the end of the month anyway. As they headed out, Garrick's earlier confidence began to waver. The old familiar pain in his stomach returned, gnawing at him. It's just nerves, he reassured himself. We'll figure everything out. Vionette was waiting for him at home, preparing lunch and rehearsing how she would break the devastating news about his diagnosis. When the door opened, she turned to greet him and froze. Garrick had entered with a young woman and a boy of about 5. "We have guests," she asked hesitantly. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Guests? Explain to your ex-wife, Garrick, who's who here," Rachel said smugly. "And Johnny and I will go pick out our new territory. I'm his woman, and this is our son," she added, addressing Vionette. Vionette stared at them, unable to comprehend what she was hearing. "Is this a joke? Are you insane?" "It's not a joke, and I'm not insane," Garrick said, trying to sound calm. "I should have told you sooner, but I didn't. Rachel and I have been together for a while, and we have a son. I brought them here because they have nowhere else to go. We can't all live together, so you'll have to pack your things. I'll call a cab, and everything will be fine." "What address will you give the driver? I have nowhere to go," Vionette said, still in shock. "There's a hotel nearby," Garrick replied, as if it were the most logical solution. "You can stay there for a few days while you find something more permanent. A divorce shouldn't be complicated. We don't have kids, and I don't think you'll contest the division of property. Take what you need, your clothes, dishes, whatever's reasonable. I'll even give you some money." "You'd better not give her too much," Rachel interjected. "We need to live on something too." "Stay out of this. It's between me and Vionette," Garrick said, trying to sound authoritative. Sure, Rachel said mockingly. "But don't forget, I need to feed our son." Garrick led Vionette to their bedroom, pulling out a dusty suitcase to help her pack. Vionette moved mechanically, unable to fully process what was happening. Her husband, her Garrick, was kicking her out of their home, and there was nothing she could do about it. Vionette stood in the middle of the room, suitcase in hand, her emotions teetering between despair and anger. Finally, she said quietly but firmly, "You know, I could call the police right now." Garrick froze. "What would that accomplish? Sure, maybe they won't kick Rachel out. She has a child after all. But no one can force me out of my own home." "What are you suggesting? That we all live here together?" His voice rose in frustration. "This apartment," Garrick continued, "is mostly mine. I paid for it. I covered the mortgage. You didn't work, didn't contribute. You didn't even take care of yourself. Look at what you've become. Now you want what? To split the apartment? Turn it into some kind of shared living space? God forbid." Vionette's voice was calm, but laced with a bitterness she couldn't hide. "Don't worry, Garrick. I'll leave. I'll come back for the rest of my things later. For now, I'm going, because I can't stand living here with you. But before I go, I should tell you something." She paused, watching his face for a reaction. "The biopsy results came back. You have cancer. Stage 4. The documents are on the table. You should see a doctor as soon as possible, preferably with your wife." She practically spat out the last word. "Fortunately, I'm no longer burdened with taking care of you or watching you waste away." Garrick collapsed onto the sofa, clutching a rag in his trembling hands. "Are you serious?" he asked in a whisper. "More than you can imagine. The papers are there. Read them yourself. But don't count on me for help. You're no longer a part of my life," Vionette said as she grabbed her suitcase and headed for the door. On her way out, she glanced into the kitchen, where Rachel was feeding Johnny. "Good luck," she said, her voice tinged with mock politeness. She walked out, managing to maintain a composed appearance until she reached the small hotel room she had rented. There, alone at last, she allowed herself to cry, fully absorbing the catastrophe her life had become. Meanwhile, Garrick sat in stunned silence, the medical documents still untouched on the table. He couldn't bring himself to read them. Everything around him felt surreal, as though the ground had been ripped out from under him. Seeking distraction, he wandered into the kitchen. "So, she's gone?" Rachel asked casually. "Garrick, did she always feed you that bland mush? Everything steamed, tasteless, no salt or pepper. No wonder you're so skinny." "I like it," Johnny piped up. Rachel rolled her eyes. "Sure, kid, it's fine for babies or toothless old folks. Let's order a pizza. Hand me your phone," she said, looking at Garrick more closely. "What's with your face? You look like you've been to a funeral. Did she threaten you with court or something?" "It's fine," Garrick muttered. "Nothing to worry about." "Good, because if she tries, we'll handle it. You just need to toughen up a bit, Garrick. Right now, you look worse than a corpse. Seriously, what kind of pizza do you want?" Garrick flinched at her comparison. "I don't care. I'm not hungry. I'm going to lie down," he said, leaving the kitchen without another word. Rachel shook her head disapprovingly. "Men," she muttered under her breath. Lying in the bedroom, Garrick felt the now familiar ache in his stomach intensify. He knew it wasn't just nerves this time. He thought about what Vionette had said, about the cancer, and for the first time, he fully grasped the reality of his situation. Yet, he couldn't bring himself to tell Rachel. "She'll find out soon enough," he thought bitterly. "But when she does, I doubt anything good will come of it." A month later, Garrick and Vionette met at the courthouse to finalize their divorce. Vionette gasped when she saw him. "Garrick, are you getting treatment? You look terrible." "I'm fine," Garrick snapped. "In fact, my wife and I are doing great. And you? How are you?" "I'm fine too," Vionette replied coolly, though her heart ached at the sight of him. It was clear he wasn't taking care of himself, wasn't following any kind of treatment or diet. But what could she do? Their lives were separate now, and any attempt to intervene would likely be met with hostility. After leaving Garrick, Vionette struggled to figure out her next steps. Though he had given her some money, it wouldn't last long, especially if she continued staying in a hotel. She had no idea what to do. In her desperation, she reached out to Natalie, Jareth's wife. Though they had never been close, Natalie, driven by curiosity or perhaps genuine sympathy, invited Vionette over. Natalie was outraged by Garrick's actions and immediately suggested legal action. "Take him to court," she insisted. "We'll clean him out. Let him and that tramp hop between cheap hotels." Jareth, however, was more pragmatic. "Calm down, Natalie. Whether or not you can take him to the cleaners is one thing, but for now, Vionette needs to figure out how to move forward." Natalie scoffed. "You're just defending your buddy. You men are all the same. If you ever tried pulling something like this, Jareth, you'd regret it." Vionette, meanwhile, found herself agreeing more with Jareth's approach. She needed a practical plan, not a drawn-out legal battle. As she listened to Natalie's tirades, she couldn't help but think that Rachel, with her fiery temperament, would probably make a better friend for Natalie than she ever could. Vionette understood that finding a job was the most practical solution. However, she had no idea how to rent an apartment or search for work. Years of focusing solely on her home, husband, and domestic life had left her unprepared for making independent decisions. Here, Jareth's help was invaluable. With his assistance, Vionette quickly rented a room in an apartment that fit her budget. She also remembered her vocational training and found a job. Though her long break from work made her an unappealing candidate, she managed to secure a position. It wasn't glamorous, but it was enough to cover her rent and living expenses. At first, Vionette often visited Natalie and Jareth, sharing her small victories and frustrations. She secretly hoped to hear something about Garrick, though she never asked directly. Jareth, who saw Garrick nearly every day, didn't mention much about him, and Vionette never revealed Garrick's illness to them. One day, after Jareth left the house, Natalie surprised Vionette with an unexpected question. "Tell me honestly, Vionette, was there ever something between you and my Jareth?" Vionette was stunned. She hadn't anticipated such a question. "Of course not now, not ever." "What are you talking about?" "Well, you knew him before, didn't you? Before Garrick?" It was true. Over 10 years ago, fresh out of vocational school, Vionette had met Garrick and Jareth, both final-year university students. They had competed for her attention, and for a while Vionette herself wasn't sure who she liked more. But Garrick had been more persistent and proposed to her first. In hindsight, Vionette sometimes wondered how her life might have turned out if Jareth had been the one to take the lead. "There was nothing between us," Vionette repeated firmly. "Sure, maybe back then," Natalie said, her voice dripping with suspicion. "But now? You're a free woman after all. I've seen the way he looks at you." Natalie, please don't make things up, Vionette replied, uncomfortable with the turn the conversation was taking. Why not? You could do worse. You're single now and he's… Natalie's tone was half joking, but her eyes betrayed something sharper. Jealousy. Stop it, Natalie. Nothing happened then, and nothing will happen now, Vionette said, more firmly this time. After that conversation, Vionette realised she couldn't visit Natalie in Jareth's home anymore. Whether Natalie's suspicions were justified or not didn't matter. Vionette didn't want to cause any discomfort or misunderstandings. Vionette threw herself into work, honing her skills and making an effort to socialise. Soon she had a circle of friends, and thoughts of her previous life began to fade. Garrick occasionally crossed her mind, but she imagined he was doing well, recovering, supported by a young wife who cared for him and their child. However, her thoughts often lingered on Johnny, Garrick's little son. She wondered what it would have been like if Garrick had confessed earlier and brought Johnny to her. Could she have raised him? What nonsense, she would scold herself. No mother would willingly give up her child. And from what she could see, Rachel was a decent mother. Meanwhile, Garrick's life seemed to be falling apart. Shortly after divorcing Vionette, he and Rachel filed for marriage at the registry office. They opted against a lavish wedding, choosing instead to spend the money on a honeymoon. But during their trip, Garrick's health, which had been deteriorating quietly, took a turn for the worse. The change in climate, unfamiliar food, and increased activity took their toll. Garrick tried to hide his condition from Rachel, but it wasn't long before he could no longer keep up with her pace. "Garrick, you're ruining my vacation," Rachel said one day as she stared at him sprawled on the hotel bed. "You're only 5 years older than me, but you act like some ancient grandpa. Lying around all day like a turtle. Why should I have to go out alone? You could at least be jealous or something." Garrick forced a weak smile, thinking, her insensitivity is incredible. Can't she see how awful I feel? Vionette would never leave my side. She'd be fussing over me, offering pills or herbal tea, asking how I was feeling every second. He debated whether to tell Rachel about his illness, but decided against it. He didn't want to ruin the trip entirely. He resolved to come clean once they returned home. When they finally got back, Garrick was barely holding on. Without even greeting Johnny, who had been staying with a nanny, he stumbled into the bedroom, collapsed onto the unmade bed, and asked Rachel to call an ambulance. Rachel, stunned, stared at him for a moment before reluctantly picking up her phone. For the first time, she began to realise the seriousness of her husband's condition. "Oh, come on, calling an ambulance already. Is it that bad, Garrick?" Rachel asked, finally realising the severity of the situation. Garrick, unable to hold back any longer, nodded weakly. "Fine, just hold on," she muttered. "At least let me unpack our things first. Johnny, come here. What did we bring you as a gift?" Garrick watched her, thinking bitterly. How can she not see how bad this is? Dialing the emergency number himself, he thought, am I really going to die like this, with no one even offering me a glass of water? When the paramedics arrived, Rachel didn't even come out to see what was happening. She stayed busy unpacking, uninterested in her husband's condition. The paramedics gave Garrick pain relief, but didn't recommend hospitalization. "As you can understand," one of them said, "this kind of illness isn't treated by emergency services or general hospitals. You need to contact your oncologist immediately to arrange for proper treatment." After the paramedics left, Rachel stormed into the room. "Why did they say oncologist? Do you have…" She couldn't bring herself to say the word. "So, she finally believes I'm not faking," Garrick thought grimly before admitting the truth. "Yes, I have cancer. I don't know how much time I have left, but the doctors aren't optimistic." Rachel's face twisted with anger. "So that's why your ex-wife left so easily. She didn't leave me a husband. She left me a wreck to nurse. What a clever little plan. She used you until you were no good, and now I'm stuck with the leftovers." "What are you even talking about, Rachel?" Garrick asked weakly. "You know exactly what I mean," she snapped. "While you were healthy, she didn't need me. But now, when you're falling apart, she dumps you on me." God, why is this my life? I waited 5 years for you to make me your wife. I gave you a son, and this is what I get in return? It wasn't like that, Garrick tried to say. Vionette, then you got sick, and she ran without a tear or a word of reproach. She should have kissed my hands for taking you off her plate. Stop it, Rachel, Garrick said, trying to keep his voice calm, knowing stress would only worsen his pain. Rachel ignored him, ranting louder. Even when Johnny started crying, she snapped at the boy. What's your problem now? Stop crying. This is adult business. Go to your room or I swear I'll deal with you. Rachel, leave him alone, Garrick said weakly. But Rachel wouldn't stop. She berated her husband, cursed her bad luck, and complained about the burden of caring for a sick man and a child. That night, after putting Johnny to bed and giving Garrick his pain medication, she packed her things and left. The next day, Garrick forced himself to go to the doctor, half hoping they would admit him to the hospital. Rachel's outbursts had made staying at home unbearable, and he worried for Johnny, left alone with her anger. But the doctor's news shattered any remaining hope. The disease had progressed too far for effective treatment. Hospitalization wasn't an option, but they prescribed palliative care and various procedures to ease his symptoms. When Garrick asked about his prognosis, the doctor said bluntly, "There's nothing more we can do to stop the disease. The focus now should be on ensuring you have a dignified end-of-life experience. We can recommend a hospice, but there might be waiting lists." Garrick nodded numbly, thinking, "So that's it? A one-way ticket. All that's left is to pray that the end won't be too painful. Though, as an atheist, what good will praying do?" Returning home, he found Rachel more distant than ever. She insisted he should go to a hospital or hospice, saying she couldn't bear the burden of caring for him any longer. Garrick refused, knowing there were no available hospital beds and suspecting she was more concerned about her own convenience than his well-being. The days that followed were marked by Rachel's constant accusations, complaints, and resentment. She blamed him for ruining her life, for being selfish, for trapping her in a role she never wanted. Garrick, growing weaker by the day, tried to tune her out, focusing instead on the few moments he could spend with Johnny. One evening, after another heated argument, Rachel finally broke. She tucked Johnny into bed, gave Garrick his pain injection, and walked out the door without looking back. She didn't return. When Garrick woke up, he initially waited for Rachel to return. As time passed, he grew worried. Walking around the apartment, he found a note on the vanity table with a single word: gone. Checking around, he realized that Rachel had taken all her money, jewelry, and valuable belongings. "Dad, when will Mum come back?" Johnny's small voice startled him from behind. The boy stood there, still in his pajamas, rubbing his eyes. "I don't know, sweetheart. Go get dressed, okay? I'll make you something to eat. What would you like?" "I don't know. I want Mom to come back. There's some cookies. I can get them myself. Are you better now?" "Not completely, but I'll manage to make something." "You don't have to. Mom lets me eat cookies for breakfast," Johnny said, his voice trembling, tears welling up in his eyes. No, she'll come back soon, healthy and happy," Garrick lied, his heart breaking for his son. Even that short exchange left him exhausted. He knew he needed to feed the boy but had no energy to cook. For himself, he could barely manage a few spoonfuls of liquid food each day. He gave Johnny permission to eat cookies with milk, then collapsed onto the bed. "I need to call someone for help," he thought. But who? The only person who came to mind was Jareth. Not only did they need to settle matters related to the business, but Jareth might also know how to help with this impossible situation. When Garrick explained his plight, Jareth arrived almost immediately. They quickly resolved the business issue. Garrick sold his share to Jareth, putting part of the money into a trust for Johnny and keeping the rest for medical care and a caregiver. Jareth also arranged for a caregiver, finding a retired nurse willing to handle both Garrick's care and Johnny's needs. "Jareth," Garrick said hesitantly, "I want to call Vionette. Not to ask for help, I just want to ask for forgiveness. I need to make peace with people before it's too late." "Of course," Jareth said gently. I haven't spoken to her in a while. There was some falling out between her and Natalie, but I think she still has the same number. Call her. You should talk to her. Jareth stayed until the nurse arrived, explained her duties, and ensured everything was in order. Once Garrick was settled and calmed by a pain injection, he fell asleep, deciding to call Vionette the next day. He knew there might not be a tomorrow, but he was too drained to do anything else. Meanwhile, Vionette's life was moving forward. She was doing well at her job, had made new friends, and marvelled at how she had once lived so differently. Though she still thought of Garrick often, worrying about his health, she consoled herself with the thought that he was likely receiving treatment and doing well. If something serious happened, she reasoned, someone would tell me. After all, we spent 10 years together. She had tried calling him a few times, but his number was no longer in service. Out of pride, she avoided asking Jareth or Natalie about him, not wanting them to think she was clinging to the past. In truth, if Garrick had called her to suggest starting over, she would have refused. Her current life suited her. Then, one day, the call came. Vionette, it's me. I'm sorry I haven't called. It's been complicated. I wanted to ask for your forgiveness. It's time for me to make amends. Make amends? What do you mean? Vionette asked, fear creeping into her voice. Garrick, are you very sick? Yes, Vionette, he said quietly. I let my health deteriorate. I didn't take care of myself, and now it's too late. The doctors have stopped active treatment. They're just keeping me comfortable. My time is running out. Oh, Garrick, Vionette whispered, horrified. That can't be true. Are they sure there's nothing more they can do? They're sure. I don't want to burden you with this, but I needed to say I'm sorry. I know I wronged you, and it's probably foolish to ask, but please don't hate me. Don't be ridiculous, Vionette said, her voice trembling. I never hated you. I couldn't. A wave of cold washed over her as she fully grasped the reality of his words. Despite everything, Garrick was still the man she had once loved, the man she had spent a decade of her life with. She could only remember the good things now, his youth, strength, and love. Is there anything I can do for you, Garrick? Tell me, she said earnestly. I know. Your wife. There's no wife anymore. Rachel left me. She even left Johnny. He's still with me. She left the boy too? Vionette asked, stunned. How could she? I don't know, but we're managing. Jareth helped me hire a nurse. She's wonderful. She takes care of me and Johnny. It's not easy, but I'm not in much pain. The hardest part is the emotional toll. I just want to see you one last time, Vionette. Will you come? Of course, Garrick. Are you at home? I'll come right now, Vionette said, already grabbing her bag. That would mean so much to me, thank you. Don't thank me, Garrick. I'm coming. Just wait for me. I'll be there in an hour, she said hurriedly. I'll be waiting, Garrick replied softly. Vionette hung up the phone, pacing nervously around her small room. The apartment was quiet. Her neighbours weren't home. She started toward her closet to choose an outfit, but stopped herself. This isn't a date, she thought. It doesn't matter how I look. God, Garrick, my Garrick is dying. What can I do? I can't help him. Just try not to upset him further. Vionette quickly dressed and freshened up. Just as she was about to leave, the doorbell rang. Who could that be? She wondered in frustration as she opened the door. It was Jack, her downstairs neighbour, a notorious drunkard. He often roamed the building, knocking on doors to borrow money. Vionette had never lent him anything, knowing it would never be returned. Vionette, come on, be a good neighbour, Jack slurred, reeking of alcohol. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. My oldest is back from the zone, released early for good behaviour. Imagine that. We've been celebrating for 3 days now, but the money's all gone. But don't worry, we'll pay you back. My son's going to work, and I will too. I swear. No, Jack, I can't help you, Vionette said firmly, trying to close the door. Vionette, don't be like that. Come on, it's a celebration. Show some compassion. You're such a kind, beautiful woman. Off to a date, are you? Vionette gritted her teeth, her patience wearing thin. She didn't have time to argue. Reluctantly, she pulled a small bill from her wallet. "Fine, just this once. Don't come back. I'm in a hurry. I'm going to visit a sick relative." "Good for you visiting the sick. We'll drink to their health and to you too," Jack said, his greedy eyes lingering on her wallet. He noticed the other bills inside. "What's with the stinginess? You've got plenty in there. Why not give a little more? One bottle isn't enough. We need 2 each." "Leave now," Vionette snapped, closing her wallet. But Jack grabbed her purse. "Come on, you're not going to miss it. It's for a good cause." "Let go, you scoundrel," Vionette cried, trying to pull her bag back. But Jack, stronger and desperate for another drink, yanked it away, shoving her in the process. She fell, striking her head against the corner of a table. Jack glanced at her motionless form, muttering, "See what greed gets you. She'll be fine. Women like her are tough." He rifled through her purse, took her wallet, and fled. Vionette lay unconscious, a pool of blood forming under her head. Luckily, her neighbours returned home shortly after, found her, and called an ambulance. She was rushed to the hospital with a severe concussion and head injury. Meanwhile, Garrick waited for hours, but Vionette didn't show. He tried calling her, but there was no answer. "I see how it is," he thought. At first she promised, but then she must have changed her mind. Decided there was no point in revisiting old wounds. Fair enough. At least we talked on the phone. I should be grateful for that. Garrick's condition continued to worsen. The next day, he asked his nurse to call Jareth. "He's in bad shape," the nurse told Jareth. "Come quickly if you want to see him. I think he wants to say goodbye, and maybe discuss arrangements. I'm worried about Johnny. He's so young and he knows something's wrong with his father." Jareth arrived promptly. Garrick, though weak, managed to finalise his business matters and formally revoked Rachel's parental rights, as she had abandoned Johnny and never returned. "Jareth, I don't want Johnny to grow up in an orphanage," Garrick whispered. "Don't worry, Garrick. I won't let that happen. I don't have kids of my own. Natalie and I will raise him. She might grumble, but she'll come around." "Thank you, my friend," Garrick said, his cold hand gripping Jareth's. A few days later, Garrick passed away. Efforts to contact Rachel about the funeral were unsuccessful. No one knew where she was. Vionette, still in the hospital, remained unreachable, her phone turned off. Neither of Garrick's former wives attended the funeral. Jareth kept his promise and took Johnny in, despite Natalie's objections. "This wasn't part of the deal," Natalie said irritably. "I didn't sign up to raise someone else's kid." "No one's asking you to raise him," Jareth replied firmly. "Just treat him well. You didn't want kids of your own, and that's fine, but I need this. He needs this." "Fine," Natalie huffed, "but let's be clear. He has a mother somewhere, doesn't he? Why are we involved at all?" "She's gone, Natalie. She abandoned him. The court stripped her of her rights." "This is the end of the discussion," Jareth said, ending the argument. Natalie had no choice but to accept Johnny's presence in her home, though she resented it deeply. She knew better than to openly defy Jareth. Her entire lifestyle depended on him. Without him, there would be no glamorous events, no multiple vacations each year. A divorce would leave her with nothing, especially since she couldn't have children of her own and had no fallback. Vionette spent a month in the hospital. When she regained consciousness, her first thought was of Garrick, though her memories were fragmented. At first, she believed they were still married and living together with Garrick waiting for her at home. Slowly, the truth began to surface, but the details of what had happened remained blurry. When a police officer came to take her statement, she could only describe a terrifying man who had pushed her. The investigation quickly uncovered that her neighbour was responsible, and he confessed, admitting to stealing her phone. However, he had given the phone to his son, who had since disappeared. Vionette couldn't remember any phone numbers, not Garrick's, not Jareth's. Her friends visited her often, but they couldn't help her reconnect with Garrick. Vionette clung to the hope that she would be discharged soon. She planned to visit Garrick in person, apologising for what she assumed he must think, that she had abandoned him out of fear. She didn't know that Garrick was already gone. While Vionette recovered, Natalie was busy plotting. Though she had grudgingly accepted Johnny's presence, she was determined to find a way to get rid of him. The only feasible option, she realized, was to locate Rachel. As Johnny's biological mother, Rachel might have a legal path to reclaim her parental rights, even if they had been revoked. Natalie reasoned that Rachel wasn't a bad person, she didn't drink, and her abandonment could be chalked up to stress from Garrick's illness. Natalie reached out to mutual acquaintances and, after considerable effort, managed to contact Rachel. "Garrick's dead," Natalie told her bluntly. "What?" "That was quick," Rachel replied, shocked. "I didn't even know he was that bad off. What about the inheritance?" "Well, if you want to claim anything, you'd better act fast. From what I know, Garrick finalized the divorce before he died. But Johnny, he's still your son. No one can take that away from you." "I'm his mother," Rachel said decisively. "I'll come get him. He's registered in the apartment, isn't he? I'll move in with him." "He's here with us," Natalie said. "But if you want him, you'd better hurry. And don't worry about Vionette. She hasn't shown up or tried to claim anything." Rachel didn't waste time. She arrived at Natalie's apartment shortly after. Jareth was at work, leaving the women to greet each other like old friends. Hearing his mother's voice, Johnny ran out of his room and threw himself into her arms. "Mom, you're back. Dad's gone, isn't he? We'll go home now, right?" "Yes, sweetheart, we'll go home. Mum will never leave you again. You love me, don't you?" Rachel cooed. Natalie hesitated. "Maybe we should wait for Jareth. He's responsible for Johnny now." "To hell with him," Rachel snapped. "I'm the mother, not him. What does he have to say about it?" "I suppose you're right. I'll get the keys," Natalie said, handing Rachel the apartment keys. "Perfect. Tell Jareth we're leaving. He can drop off the documents later. I'll figure out the rest. Paperwork, everything." Johnny hesitated. "Will we come back to visit? Uncle Jareth said he'd be like a new dad to me." "Don't be silly," Rachel said dismissively. "We'll find you a better dad. Now go pack your things." Natalie lent Rachel a large bag, and together they hurriedly packed Johnny's belongings. Both women knew Jareth would object and wanted to leave before he returned. When the door closed behind Rachel and Johnny, Natalie felt an overwhelming sense of relief. At last, the gloomy, withdrawn child was gone. She had tried to bond with Johnny, offering him sweets and toys, but he remained distant. Rachel was right, Natalie thought. Jareth's all about the kid's tragic loss. What tragedy? He's 5 years old, living comfortably, being fed and cared for. What does he know about loss? His father's death means nothing to him. Natalie opened a bottle of wine to celebrate her newfound freedom and to steel herself for Jareth's inevitable displeasure when he found out. Jareth was furious with Natalie, his anger simmering just beneath the surface. "How could you let Johnny go, Natalie? We're responsible for him," he snapped. "And what was I supposed to do?" Natalie shot back, emboldened by a glass of wine. "Keep him against his will? Against his mother's will? Rachel's his real mother, Jareth. She has rights. Did you see how that boy ran to her? What should I have done? Tear him away? And anyway, it's easy for you to talk about responsibility when you're gone all day, and I'm the one stuck here with him." "Oh yes, poor you. It must have been exhausting," Jareth retorted, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "The truth is, you're not fit to care for a child. You never wanted one, and you've proven that time and time again." "You're being unfair," Natalie whined, suddenly realizing how far she had pushed him. "Look, if you want, we can go together and bring him back. I miss him too, you know. Rachel only went to their old apartment. That's why I gave her the key, to keep her from disappearing somewhere." Jareth glared at her with pure disdain. "You're a lying, selfish hypocrite. I'm not going anywhere with you. In fact, I don't even want to see you right now." "Jareth, please," Natalie whimpered, stepping toward him. But Jareth ignored her, retreating to his office and slamming the door. Shutting out the sound of her sniffling in the hallway, he picked up his phone and dialed Rachel. "Rachel, are you home? Is Johnny with you?" he asked, his tone cold and firm. Yes, we're home. And Johnny's with me. And his new father, Rachel replied, her voice full of defiance. So don't even think about interfering in our lives. Listen carefully, Jareth said, cutting through her tirade. You have no right to be in that apartment. Neither you nor your so-called new husband. If you don't leave by tomorrow morning, I'll come over with the police, and I'll be taking Johnny. Over my dead body, Rachel yelled. Jareth didn't wait to argue. He hung up and muttered to himself, I just hope nothing happens to Johnny before tomorrow. The next morning, as Jareth arrived at Garrick's apartment building, he was startled to see Vionette walking out, tears streaming down her face. Vionette, he exclaimed, rushing over. What are you doing here? Where have you been? We couldn't find you anywhere. Is it true? Is Garrick really gone? She stammered, barely able to speak through her sobs. Jareth nodded solemnly. Vionette collapsed against the doorframe, weeping. Vionette had only been released from the hospital the day before, having undergone extensive tests and treatment for her injuries. Doctors had warned her to avoid stress, a laughable piece of advice given her current situation. She had gone back to her rented room, reassured by neighbors that her belongings were safe. The elderly woman next door greeted her warmly. Oh, Vionette, dear, we were so worried about you. As for that thug who hurt you, don't worry, the police took him away. He won't bother anyone again. Thank you, Mrs. Jones, Vionette said softly. Did anyone come looking for me while I was gone? Just your friends from work, the woman replied. And satisfied that no one else had tried to contact her, Vionette decided to visit Garrick the next morning. When Vionette arrived at Garrick's apartment, she was surprised when Rachel answered the door. Hello, I'd like to see Garrick, Vionette said hesitantly. Rachel smirked, her eyes sweeping over Vionette in mock appraisal. Well, aren't you a sight? But you're a little late, dear predecessor. There's no Garrick here anymore. We buried him almost a month ago. Vionette froze, her breath catching. He's gone, she whispered, leaning against the doorframe for support. What did you expect? He was sick for ages. You must have known he didn't have long. And don't get any ideas, you wouldn't have inherited anything even if you'd come sooner. Johnny and I are the legal heirs. You're just the ex-wife. From inside the apartment, a man's voice called out, Rachel, why's the door open? He appeared in the doorway, his friendly greeting contrasting sharply with Rachel's hostility. Goodbye, Rachel snapped, shoving Vionette out of the doorway and slamming the door shut. Vionette barely noticed. Her mind was reeling. Garrick is gone. I didn't even say goodbye. He waited for me, and I wasn't there. The thought hammered through her mind as she stumbled away, tears blurring her vision. Vionette stood frozen in place for a few moments, tears streaming down her face. Wiping them away, she stepped out of the building and immediately bumped into Jareth. Vionette! Jareth exclaimed, stunned. You're here. We tried to find you, but your phone was off. Let's sit down for a moment so you can calm yourself. Then we can go to the cemetery. It's almost been 40 days since Garrick's passing. Did you go into the apartment? No, Vionette said, shaking her head. Rachel answered the door and told me everything. Garrick, he's really gone. She paused, struggling to hold back tears. And Johnny? Did you see him? Jareth's face darkened. Johnny was staying with me after the funeral. I planned to take legal custody and eventually adopt him. But Rachel found out somehow. She showed up yesterday while I was out and took him away. And Natalie... He broke off, frustration visible. Natalie just let her take him. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if she told Rachel herself. She never wanted Johnny in the first place. Jareth, Vionette began gently, don't make any rash decisions. I understand your frustration, but divorces... Well, let's just say I have my own complicated feelings about them. Jareth sighed heavily. I just want Johnny to be loved, Vionette, and I promised Garrick I wouldn't abandon him, but how can I leave him with Rachel and her new... whatever he is? Will you come with me to get him back? Vionette could see that Jareth genuinely needed her support, and she herself was worried about Johnny. She nodded. Of course I'll come. They returned to Garrick's apartment and rang the doorbell. What is it now? Rachel shrieked before even opening the door. When she saw Vionette and Jareth, her tone turned mocking. "Oh, look who's here, the cheerleading squad. Not going to help you, honey." "Enough, Rachel," Jareth said firmly. "Give me Johnny, leave the keys and get out. Don't make me involve the police." Rachel sneered but didn't back down. "You're all bark, no bite. This is my son and this apartment is mine." Jareth ignored her, raising his voice. "Johnny, are you there?" A muffled shout came from inside. "Let me go, you jerk," Johnny yelled. Seconds later, the boy ran out and threw himself into Jareth's arms. "Uncle Roma, take me with you. I don't want to stay here with that Kevin." "Johnny, what are you talking about? Come here." "Don't you want to live with Mom?" Rachel cried, trying to grab him. "No, he says I'm useless and should be sent away," Johnny sobbed. A young man, likely in his 20s, appeared in the doorway, barely acknowledging Jareth and Vionette. "What the hell is this?" he demanded, glaring at Rachel. "You said the apartment was yours, but now there are people coming and threatening to call the police. What kind of mess have you dragged me into?" Rachel stomped her foot. "It is mine. Tell them, Jareth." Jareth's voice was ice cold. "Rachel, you know perfectly well that you have no claim to this apartment or Johnny. You're free to charm as many boyfriends as you want, but you'll have to find other assets to flaunt." The young man snorted. "Forget this, Rachel. I'm not getting involved in some fight over a kid in a fake apartment. I'm out." "Kevin, wait," Rachel begged, clutching his arm. "I'll come with you. Just give me a second to grab my things." Throwing curses at Jareth, Vionette, and even Johnny, Rachel hastily packed a bag and ran after Kevin, slamming the door behind her. Johnny, sitting in Jareth's arms, whimpered, "Mum's leaving again. I'll never have a mum, will I?" "Don't cry, little one," Vionette said softly, taking him from Jareth's arms. "Let's get you something to eat. Have you had breakfast?" "No," Johnny mumbled. "They said we'd eat later. Yesterday I had a roll. They gave me fish too, but it was really salty." Vionette's heart ached at the boy's words. "Let's go home," she said firmly. Jareth picked up the keys Rachel had left behind. "We'll need to change the locks," he muttered. "But let's head back for now. Vionette, you'll come too, right?" Vionette hesitated, glancing at the room where Garrick had spent his final days. "No, I'll go back to my place," she said quietly. Jareth frowned. "Why not come with us? Don't worry about Natalie, she's not a problem anymore. I'm serious." Vionette smiled faintly. "No, Johnny, I'm going home. But we'll see each other again soon, okay? Don't be sad." She turned to Jareth. "Let me know when you're going to the cemetery. I want to visit Garrick's grave." Jareth nodded, his face solemn. "Of course, Vionette." "Get in the car. I'll at least drive you home," Jareth said. Vionette agreed, realizing the public transportation ride would be too long and she already felt drained from the morning's events. On the way home, she marveled at how the aching grief of learning about Garrick's death had softened into a bittersweet sadness. Perhaps she had Johnny to thank for that, as he played with a toy, chattering sometimes to her, sometimes to Jareth. "He could have been my son," she thought with a faint smile. Jareth was also deep in thought, though he didn't seem sad. His mind lingered on the upcoming confrontation with Natalie and his parting with Vionette. Years ago, both he and Garrick had been in love with her, but she chose Garrick. In Jareth's heart, there remained an unresolved sorrow over a love that never came to be. Though he had experienced other relationships and even marriage, none of them had touched him as deeply as his feelings for Vionette. Now Garrick's death seemed to open a door to changes neither of them had anticipated. They parted at Vionette's home as friends, promising each other and Johnny that they would see each other again. Natalie greeted Jareth and Johnny with exaggerated enthusiasm, eager to make up for her previous harsh words. She threw her arms around Johnny, declaring how much she had missed him. The boy smiled politely but pulled away. "Why don't you feed him before you start hugging him?" Jareth said dryly. Natalie led Johnny to the kitchen, peppering him with questions about what had happened with his mother, where she had gone, and why. Slowly, Johnny began to open up, recounting his time with Rachel and how Uncle Roma had sent her and that awful Kevin away. Then, unexpectedly, he mentioned that Auntie Vionette had been there too. Natalie's face darkened. She stormed out of the kitchen to confront Jareth. "So that's why you went there? To see Vionette? Do you think I didn't notice something's been going on between you two for a while?" "Are you out of your mind?" Jareth snapped. She'd been in the hospital and came to ask about Garrick, not knowing he had passed away. "No, and conveniently showed up just in time to meet with you," Natalie said sarcastically. "Who are you trying to fool? Why didn't you just hand the boy over to her? Instead, you dragged him back here to burden me again." Jareth gave her a cold look. "So the hugs and kisses are over already? If you're so unhappy, you're free to leave. Go wherever you want. Right now, if you like." "Oh, is that how it is? Maybe I really will leave. Wouldn't that scare you?" Natalie challenged. "Sit down, Natalie," Jareth said, exhaling heavily. "No, it wouldn't scare me at all. I've been tired of your selfish attitude toward our marriage and me for a long time. I'd actually prefer if you left. In fact, I insist." Natalie panicked. She had no real feelings for Jareth, but her financial dependence on him was stronger than any emotional bond. She quickly switched tactics, promising to be the perfect mother to Johnny and the best wife Jareth could ask for. For a while, things settled, but it didn't last long. Natalie couldn't maintain the facade of being a good mother. She often left Johnny alone at home, without even preparing him meals, telling him, "Stay quiet, don't tell Jareth anything, and I'll bring you a chocolate bar." Eventually, her neglect led to a near tragedy. While trying to cook for himself, Johnny mishandled the gas stove. If not for the neighbors, a fire could have broken out. That incident was the final straw for Jareth. He told Natalie he couldn't live with her anymore and filed for divorce. After a series of dramatic arguments and outbursts, Natalie packed up and left, taking whatever valuables she could. Jareth didn't mind, considering it a small price to pay for freedom. During this time, Jareth occasionally met with Vionette and often spoke to her on the phone, though he hesitated to express his feelings. Only after finalizing his divorce did he finally confess that Vionette had always been the most important woman in his life. "I wouldn't have dared to say this while Garrick was alive. Back then, I couldn't interfere in your relationship. I saw how much you loved him, and he loved you too. I decided to be content with just seeing you, even if it was as my best friend's wife." "Why bring it up now, Jareth? It's all in the past," Vionette said softly. "Why can't the past become the present?" Jareth countered. "I know I'm not the ideal catch, a divorced man with a child. I'm not asking you to decide right away, but think about it. Could we be husband and wife? Is that really impossible?" "Jareth, forgive me," Vionette replied with a small smile. "But this isn't romantic at all. This isn't how you make a proposal." "Ah, so that's the issue," Jareth said, brightening. "Thank you for the hint." Vionette stood in stunned silence, her hands pressed to her cheeks, a warm blush spreading across her face. Jareth, on one knee, held out the small velvet box, his earnest gaze locked on hers. For a moment, the world seemed to pause, leaving just the two of them in the room. "Jareth," she began, her voice trembling. "Yes?" he asked, a hopeful smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. She laughed softly, tears forming in her eyes. "You've caught me completely off guard." "That's the idea," Jareth said with a grin. "But I mean it, Vionette. I've loved you for so long. I've waited for this moment, even when I thought it would never come. You are the most important person in my life, and I want to spend the rest of it with you. Together we can build something new, not just for ourselves, but for Johnny too. Say yes, and I promise to make you happy." Vionette's heart swelled as she looked at him, the man who had been a steady presence during her most difficult times. Despite her initial hesitation, his sincerity broke through the walls she had built around her heart. "Yes, Jareth," she finally said, her voice full of emotion. "I'll marry you." Jareth's smile widened, and he slipped the ring onto her finger. Rising to his feet, he pulled her into a warm embrace, holding her close as if afraid to let go. "I promise you, Vionette, this is just the beginning of something wonderful," he murmured into her hair. She leaned back slightly, her hands resting on his chest as she looked up at him with a mixture of happiness and playfulness. "You know, for someone who claims not to be romantic, you're doing a pretty good job right now." He chuckled, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face. "Maybe I'm learning." At that moment, Johnny ran into the room, his small hands clutching a drawing he had made. "Uncle Roma! Auntie Vionette! Look what I drew!" They turned to the boy, whose wide smile and bright eyes lit up the room. He held up a crayon drawing of the three of them holding hands with the words "Happy Family" scrawled across the top. Vionette crouched down to his level and pulled him into a hug. "It's beautiful, Johnny." "Thank you." Jareth knelt beside them, wrapping his arms around them both. "We're going to make this picture a reality, buddy. I promise." For the first time in what felt like forever, Vionette felt truly at peace. In that moment, surrounded by love and hope for the future, she knew she was exactly where she was meant to be.